Hello and welcome to Codex Lee. My name is Lee and this is a channel all about books. So I have been in self-isolation now for several days. I live in New Zealand and we're going into proper lockdown from midnight tonight, as in you can only leave your house to go to the grocery store or to go for a walk around your block, otherwise we stay indoors. And I'll probably be making more booktube videos now, which is great because I'm working from home. I have a little more time on my hands because I'm not commuting to and from work. So this is a good time to talk to you guys about things. And one of the things I'd like to talk to you about is a fantastic readathon that I heard about yesterday. I discovered this via Kalanadi. I'll put a link to Kalanadi's channel in the description box down below. But the readathon itself was initiated by Maija at Maija Reads, and I'll put a link to the announcement video in the description box down below. I'll put a card up there as well, so do check that out. But the readathon itself is called Women Write Classic SFF, and this is all about reading classic science fiction and fantasy literature written by women. Classic is in anything written pre-2000, and I'm really excited to participate in this readathon. It takes place between the 1st of April to the 12th of April, I think. And I am going to be reading one book for this, but it is an anthology. And after I talk about this particular book I'm going to read, I'll then talk about a whole bunch of other science fiction, fantasy, fantastic literature that I own that is written by women. Not all of it is pre-2000, and some of it I've read and some of it I haven't read. But onto the book itself that I'm going to read for this readathon, and that is this one. It's called The Lifted Veil, the book of fantastic literature by women, and this is edited and introduced by A. Susan Williams. This is ideal for this readathon because, you know, there's a fair amount of stuff in here. It's about 500 pages or so. It was published in 1993, but the stories themselves, the earliest story was published in around 1806, and the most recent story in this edition was published in 1936. This is genuinely classic science fiction fantasy. I think also sort of ghost stories and horror mixed in there as well, written by women. So I'm really excited about this. I thought I would just read you a little bit of the blurb so that you get a feel for what is in this anthology. As more and more writers and readers are drawn to the fantastic, this is perhaps an opportune moment to assess and to celebrate the part that women have played in its development. For women's contribution to this genre, which now includes science fiction, stories of ghosts and the supernatural, fairy tales, stories of magic and terror, and weird horror, have been considerable and indeed seminal. Most critics now agree that it was Mary Shelley who, with Frankenstein, invented what we now call science fiction, while Anne Radcliffe's novels of the 1790s sparked the immense vogue for Gothic. In the 19th century, the same imaginative strains run through Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and Catherine Crowe's The Night Side of Nature began a vogue for ghost and horror stories that has never subsequently diminished. The Lifted Veil is the first substantial collection of women's fantasy writing from these beginnings to its modern times, and it includes a wealth of wondrous stories by the women who did so much to shape the course of fantastic fiction, including rarities by Mary Shelley, Louisa May Alcott, writing under the pseudonym A.M. Barnard, Charlotte Bronte and Harriet Beecher Stowe. Also included are intriguing tales by E. Nesbit, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Willa Carter, Catherine Mansfield, Virginia Woolf, and a host more. Finally, the modern age of fantasy is prefigured in works by May Sinclair, C.L. Moore, Isaac Dinesen, Karen Blixen, and Marjorie Lawrence. The book closing at the watershed of World War II. A second volume of contemporary stories is planned. I don't know if that came out, but I'll check, and if it has come out, I'm going to try and get hold of a copy. I got this from a second-hand bookstore in the UK. As soon as I saw that title, I thought, yes. So, like I said, I have a bunch of other books, science fiction, fantasy, horror, that are written by women that I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk first of all about the ones that I have already read. And let's begin with The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I read this a long time ago. When I was at school, I had a wonderful English teacher, Miss Hughes, who taught us, I think it was at A-level, we studied The Bloody Chamber and The Handmaid's Tale. So she introduced us to some great works by women. So I was 16, 17 at the time, about 20 years ago. And I really enjoyed reading The Bloody Chamber back then. I obsessed over the language. I kind of deconstructed every sentence. It's just rich writing. You know, there's so much to take away from it. So the premise of The Bloody Chamber is this is a series of fairy tales that have been reimagined by Angela Carter, and it really heightens the sensuality of these pieces. It really heightens the grotesque undertones of many fairy tales, and really centralizes the female characters in these as well. It's quite short. There aren't many. There are several about werewolves at the end. The Werewolf, The Company of Wolves, Wolf Alice. The Company of Wolves, there was a film version made of this, which I saw not long ago, actually, which is a weird and wonderful film, and I recommend it. But yeah, I really recommend The Bloody Chamber if you haven't already read it. It's great, and it won't take you long to get through. Moving from a very short read to a very long read. This is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is possibly my favourite work of fiction ever. I adore this. I need to reread it. It's been a few years now since I've read it. I read it just before the BBC adaptation came out. I had a copy of this for years and years and years, and I just didn't get around to reading it. I'm so glad I did. This is set in the early 19th century, and it's a kind of a parallel version of England, where magic exists, but really only in theory. Magic used to exist in practice long ago, but now it's mostly a bunch of men who gather to talk about the theory of magic. Except it starts to come back into practice primarily through the work of Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange, the two title characters. I won't say any more than that. As I said, there is a BBC TV adaptation, which was really good. I really liked it. There are extensive footnotes in this, which some people find distracting, but there's just so much of this world that Susanna Clarke has to create, and rather than interrupt the narrative all the time, she uses footnotes to do that. Oh, my cat has just come in. It's a wonderful book, and Susanna Clarke has a new book that is due out in September called Piranesi, I think is how you pronounce it, which is her first book in, I think, maybe 16 or 17 years. Only her second book. This is her debut, and it's amazing. Really recommend Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. The last bunch of books I want to talk about that I have already read. This is going to be quite difficult to hold up. Can you guess? It's Harry Potter. These are all the Harry Potter books. I've actually only read the Harry Potter books through once. It took me a long time to get to reading them. I think I read them, when would it have been? It was around the time that The Order of the Phoenix came out in cinemas that I read them all. I really liked them. I really like Harry Potter. I was very snobbish about it for so long. I was like, oh, it's a kid's book. I'm not going to read that. Eventually, I read them and I loved them. There's really not much else I can say about Harry Potter. Everybody's said everything there is to be said about those books. Now on to the books that I have not read. And let's start with... So in Maija's announcement video, there were some books in the background that I recognised. One of them was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and the other was The Stone Sky, The Obelisk Gate, the 5th season. I think I just said them in reverse order, by N.K. Jemisin. A friend of mine bought these for me a couple of years ago. I haven't read them yet. I know that they've won loads of awards. Hugo Award for Best Novel. I really know very little about them, but I don't want to know very much about them because I've heard that they're very, very good, and I'd just rather go into them knowing very little about them. So I'm really excited to read these. All the books I'm talking about now that I haven't read, I'm going to try to read this year, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, but if you guys have read this trilogy, let me know what you think. I've heard very good things. Next, I'm going to talk about two books I have by the same author. I'll start with them in reverse chronological order based on when I bought them. That author is Ursula Le Guin. There's this one, which is The Left Hand of Darkness. It's an SF Masterworks edition. It's really nice edition of this book that I got in a second-hand bookshop in the UK. I think in an Oxfam bookshop in the UK. It's a lovely edition. They were really reluctant to sell this to me for the price advertised. It was like £10. £10. And they were like, "Oh, we think that's too much. We need to go and check it." They really didn't want me to give £10 for this, but it's a bargain. I don't know very much about this book. I've heard that it's a bit weird. It was first published in 1969. Immediately recognised as a brilliant imaginative masterpiece, winning both the Nebula and Hugo Awards for Best Novel and gathering praise from every quarter. I've never read any Ursula Le Guin. I figured this is a good year as any to start. She sadly passed away, I think, about 2 years ago. She has a rich body of work to get through, and this is one of her novels that I'm keen to read. The other Ursula Le Guin book I want to talk about, it's a big one. I recently bought the books of Earthsea. So these are all the Earthsea books gathered together in this wonderful volume, and there's some brilliant artwork in here as well. I just wanted to share with you. I think there are maps. Yes, there are maps of Earthsea. So this is a really lovely edition that I bought from my local bookstore, Unity Books here in Auckland. It wasn't cheap, but I feel like it was worth it. So together with Left Hand of Darkness, I want to read all of the Earthsea tales this year. I think there's a Studio Ghibli film version of maybe one of these as well, and because or at least most of the Studio Ghibli films are on Netflix now, and we're all stuck at home, I'd like to watch that sometime soon, so I'll try and get onto this soon. So next up is a book that I bought when I was in Ireland. I was in Dublin, and there's a wonderful bookshop there, but I saw the cover of this, and I was like, wow, I would like that if for the cover than nothing else, and it's called Beauty by Sheri S. Tepper. I know nothing about it, but I mean, it's just a wonderful cover. It goes right around onto the back as well. So this was first published in 1991. I'll read you a little bit of the blurb. This is as much as I know about it. Sheri S. Tepper's recent novels have established her as one of the best science fiction writers to emerge in the 1980s. Now with Beauty, she has taken another giant stride forward to produce a novel as brilliant as it is unclassifiable. It is unlike any fantasy you have ever read. Drawing on a wellspring of much-loved fairy tales, Beauty is a powerful and moving novel of love and loss, hope and despair, magic and nature. Opening in 14th century England, it introduces Beauty, a girl who from birth has possessed a special quality. Even when her wicked aunt's curse is fulfilled on her 16th birthday, Beauty is able to sidestep the tragedy and in an extraordinary turn of events finds herself transported to the world of the future, a savage society where, even among the teeming billions, she is utterly alone. Here her adventure begins as she travels magically through time to visit places both imaginary and real, eventually coming to understand her special place in humanity's destiny. Beauty is a potent and unforgettable blend of fable, fantasy, myth and speculation, as captivating as it is uncompromising. It is one of those rare novels which is destined to carve its own unique place in the hearts and minds of readers. That sounds really exciting, and what a great cover, so I'm excited to read this one. Two more books I want to talk about. One of them, I think I bought this because it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize many years ago, and it was the year in which I thought I would read everything that was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, something that I have never done. Anyway, I bought this. It's The Testament of Jessie Lamb by Jane Rogers. Again, I'll read a bit of the blurb for you. Women are dying in their millions. Some blame scientists, some see the hand of God, some see human arrogance reaping the punishment it deserves. Jessie Lamb is an ordinary girl living in extraordinary times. As her world collapses, her idealism and courage drive her towards the ultimate act of heroism. If a human race is to survive, it's up to her. It sounds intriguing. I've heard mixed things about it, but we'll see. And finally, this particular book isn't written by a woman. I mean, it's an anthology, and some of them maybe are written by women. In many cases, we don't know. But it is edited, and the stories are collected by a woman. It's called The Books of Elves and Fairies, and this is, I think this is a high school's edition, so I think this is their crest. But it's an old book. You can see that it's got this kind of water damage on it. It's got this little inscription inside that is dated 1932. The book itself was published Have to be quite careful opening this. Oh, there's some lovely illustrations, by the way. The Book of Elves and Fairies for Storytelling and Reading Aloud and for the Children's Own Reading by Francis Jenkins Olcott. And it was first published in 1919. This particular edition is 1930. That's, I think this would be really fun to read. I do have a copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. These seem to be more folkish tales, I suppose, which is really interesting. So I'm excited about reading that. So there you go. There's lots of fantastic literature written by women that have gone through there, some of which I've read and some of which I haven't. Have you heard of these? Have you read some of these? What do you think of them? But in any case, I'm really excited next week to be reading The Lifted Veil as part of this readathon that I mentioned, and I will let you guys know how that goes. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and give it a like, and I will see you guys soon. And do take care. These are strange and troubling times, so look after each other, but at a distance. Bye for now.